late great Craig Sager was one of the most beloved sports reporters of his generation. His unflappable reporting, affable interview style, and flamboyant fashion sense made him a staple on NBA sidelines for decades. He was part of the fabric of the league, one of its most respected personalities, a guy everybody loved. And when Sager was diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia in 2014, the entire sports world rallied around him, and especially in the NBA. Players sent get well wishes via Twitter, fans and reporters dressed like him. Pretty much every sports media outlet did a profile about his courageous battle and what an amazing guy he was. And it's not hard to understand why. While Sager surely had some dark times during his 2.5-year battle with leukemia, he never once sounded defeated in public. He always insisted that he was going to fight and live every moment of his life to its fullest and take nothing for granted. He was a true inspiration to us all. And when Sager finally lost his battle with leukemia in 2016, the entire sports world mourned his passing. Tributes poured in from all directions. Sager was remembered for his hard work and indomitable spirit. His life was held up as an example for all to follow. Unfortunately, behind the scenes, Craig Sager's life was way more complicated than we have been led to believe. Craig Sager the sports icon and Craig Sager the man were not the same. Craig Sager the man made some pretty big mistakes. While his battle with leukemia was being publicly hailed as epic and courageous, behind closed doors, his family life took a bizarre and incredibly ugly twist. It was something no one who'd read any of the inspirational pieces written about Craig Sager would ever expect in a million years. In 2016, right after he received a bone marrow transplant from his eldest son, Craig Sager, the nicest guy in the NBA, wrote his 3 adult children out of his will. Then, a year after his death, Sager's widow, Stacey Sager, took legal action against her late husband's 3 eldest children to make sure they didn't contest the will. After that, the floodgates opened. Sager's children ripped Stacey Sager, laying bare a family life fraught with bitterness and jealousy. It was a shocking turn of events, given all the accolades Craig Sager had been receiving during his battle with leukemia. But before we get to that, let's start all the way back at the beginning. Craig Sager was born in Illinois in 1951 and graduated from Northwestern with a degree in speech in 1973. In 1974, his career as a broadcaster got off to a pretty auspicious start. Working for WXLT-TV, a small ABC affiliate in Sarasota, Florida, Sager convinced his boss to send him to Atlanta to cover the Braves game on April 8, 1974. That night, Hank Aaron cracked career home run 715, breaking the record set by Babe Ruth. Craig Sager, then just 22 years old, evaded security and ran out onto the field and interviewed Hank Aaron right there at home plate. That bold move was a sign of great things to come. In 1981, CNN tapped Sager to co-host their nightly sports program, CNN Sports Tonight, for which he won a Cable Ace Award in 1985. And in 1987, Sager moved to Turner's TBS division and became their go-to reporter for just about every sporting event they covered, including the NFL, Major League Baseball, college football, the PGA, the Winter Olympics, the FIFA World Cup, and the Pan Am Game. However, while Sager was the sports reporting equivalent of a utility infielder, his specialty was basketball. In 1991, he joined the NBA on TNT as a sideline reporter, and it was a perfect fit for TNT's coverage of the fun-loving league. Part of Sager's appeal was his genial personality, which is perhaps best exemplified by his outrageous wardrobe of bold, colorful suits and sport coats.
What do you plan to do after the All-Star game to get better?
Buy you a new jacket? No, you know what that is? That's horror awful. That's horrible and awful mixed together. Horror awful.
The way Sager saw it, sports are supposed to be fun, so why not have fun with the way he dressed?
It's a nice suit you got on there. Easter passed though. Easter already went by.
You know, I didn't recognize you right away. I thought you were the Good Humor ice cream man at first.
That line of thinking turned out to be a brilliant career move. Over the years, crazy suits became his thing. But of course, Sager wasn't just style, he was substance too. Anybody who's ever watched sports knows sideline interviews can be pretty bland and boring. However, Sager had a great rapport with players and coaches that made his interviews legitimately entertaining. He asked good, pertinent questions, but never pushed too hard. Players and coaches knew Sager wouldn't ambush them. And over the years, the trust Sager built started to yield interesting responses from the most unlikely sources. So when he announced in April of 2014 that he had been diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia and that he would miss the entire 2014 NBA postseason, it rocked the sports world. The outpouring of love and support Sager received was incredible. Players and fans alike took to Twitter to send him get well wishes. Kevin Garnett, who once told Craig Sager during an interview that he looked like a Christmas tree, sent a huge bouquet of flowers to Sager's hospital room. Clippers coach Doc Rivers sent them a huge fruit basket. And on April 20th, the entire crew of TNT analysts, reporters, and announcers paid tribute to their colleague by dressing like him. During that same broadcast, TNT got Sager's son, Craig Sager Jr., to fill in for his dad and interview notoriously feisty Spurs coach Greg Popovich between the third and fourth quarters. And instead of being annoyed that he had to talk to a reporter, Popovich sent Sager a heartfelt message.
Nats is great. We miss you. You've been an important part of all this for a long time, doing a great job. We want your Fanny back on the court.
As a result of that, Craig Sager was able to go home from the hospital in August. Then, after a few more months of successful treatment, it was officially announced that Craig Sager's leukemia was in remission. In March of 2015, just 11 months after announcing his diagnosis, Sager returned to the NBA sidelines to work a game between the Chicago Bulls and Oklahoma City Thunder. It was a huge deal. Obviously, TNT hyped his return, but so did other media outlets. Websites and newspapers like Bleacher Report, Sports Illustrated, and USA Today published long, in-depth stories about Sager's courageous journey. And Sager himself truly was incredible. He was so upbeat and positive about everything. His return to the NBA sidelines was the feel-good story of the spring. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. Just weeks after covering that game between the Bulls and the Thunder, Sager announced his cancer had returned. But his attitude didn't change. He vowed that he would stay strong, keep fighting, and return to the NBA once again. That summer, Sager got a second bone marrow transplant from his son. And once again, he beat leukemia into remission, returning to the NBA sidelines that October. The sports world rejoiced and marveled at Craig Sager's determination.
This is the first time I've enjoyed doing this ridiculous interview we're required to do. It's because you're here and you're back with us.
But in March of 2016, there was more bad news. The leukemia was back, and this time doctors didn't give him much of a chance. But Sager was still optimistic and vowed to never give up the fight. A few months later, TNT worked out an agreement to loan Sager to ESPN so he could cover the NBA Finals for the first time in his legendary career. On June 16, 2016, Sager worked Game 6 between the Cavs and the Warriors and conducted a memorable interview with LeBron James after his incredible 41-point, 11 assists, and 8-rebound performance.
I'm gonna ask you a question. How in the hell you go 30+ years without getting a finals game? That don't make no sense.
The following month, Vice President Joe Biden presented Craig Sager with the Jimmy V Award for Perseverance at the 2016 ESPYs, and Sager's moving speech brought the audience to its feet. Time is something that cannot be bought, Sager said. It cannot be wagered with God, and it is not an endless supply. Time, he concluded, is simply how you live your life. In August of 2016, Sager received a rare third bone marrow transplant, this time from an anonymous donor. Craig Sager Jr. tweeted photos of his dad in the hospital, still looking like he was enjoying every minute of his life. But in the end, nothing could stop the leukemia. On December 15, 2016, Craig Sager passed away at the age of 65. The entire NBA went into mourning. Players past and present expressed their condolences on Twitter, and during that evening's broadcast of a game between the Bulls and the Bucks, TNT ran an incredibly moving tribute narrated by Sager's longtime friend and colleague, Ernie Johnson. Several NBA teams even wore Craig Sager tribute t-shirts that looked like one of his signature gaudy jackets. Now, if the story ended right there, you'd swear Craig Sager was a saint, but sadly, it's not where it ends. On January 2nd, 2018, just a little over a year after Craig Sager passed away, his adult children dropped a bombshell that caught everyone by surprise. It started with a single tweet from Craig Sager Jr. Nothing like getting served, pestered by sheriffs, and taken to court over a will that myself and my sisters are not only 100% excluded from, but did not even have any interest in contesting in the first place, Sager Jr. wrote before concluding with a sarcastic, "Thanks, Dad." That tweet from Craig Sager Jr. was followed by another one from his sister, in which she expressed support for her brother, quote, coming clean about some of the dumbassery they had been dealing with. Then came another tweet, this time from Craig Sager Jr.'s ex-girlfriend. In it, she blasted Craig Sager's widow, Stacy, as a piece of shit and a soulless homewrecker. These tweets came out of nowhere. As far as everyone knew, Craig Sager was one of the greatest guys you'd ever meet. Now all of a sudden, his own kids seem to be suggesting otherwise? So what the hell was going on? Well, thanks to another whole slew of tweets and statements and court documents that were made public during the first 2 weeks of 2018, we learned that Craig Sager's personal life was not as inspirational as his public life. But let's backtrack a little bit and fill in some of the pertinent details about Craig Sager's personal life. You see, Sager married his first wife in 1980, and together they had 3 kids, Craig Sager Jr., Casey Sager, and Krista Sager. However, sometime in 2000, Sager met a Chicago Bulls dancer by the name of Stacy and fell in love despite the fact that he was still married. Not for long though. Craig's divorce was finalized in December of 2000. The following year, Craig married Stacy, the Chicago Bulls dancer, and eventually they had 2 kids, Ryan and Riley. Unfortunately, while Craig Sager was very happy with his new wife and kids, his other kids felt abandoned and neglected. They say once their dad had Stacy, she was his #1 priority. And as for Stacy, Sager's 3 adult children say she poisoned their dad against them. They say she's selfish and greedy and did everything she could to keep Sager to herself and her kids. And that brings us back to the tweets. In a tweet published on January 10, 2018, Craig Sager Jr. explained that in July of 2015, he spent 9 days in a Houston hospital donating bone marrow to his dad for a second time, a selfless act that helped prolong his dad's life for another 18 months. However, the day after he left his dad, the amazing Craig Sager wrote his 3 eldest children out of his will. Think about that. The day after Craig Sager Jr. finished donating bone marrow, racking up a bunch of medical bills, his dad rewrote his will so that he'd get no help paying them off. Later, when Craig Sager was on his deathbed, Stacy wouldn't let his adult children see him and say goodbye. According to Casey Sager, her stepmother wanted them all to herself. And things only got worse after Sager passed. And when someone dies, their last will and testament has to be probated, or officially validated in a court of law. And there are 2 ways to do this. You can probate a will in comment form, which means the court simply recognizes the will, but leaves the door open for heirs to contest the will for a set period of time. But you can also probate a will in solemn form, which means all living heirs have to appear before the court and agree not to contest the will. According to Craig Sager Jr., he, Casey, and Krista made it perfectly clear that they did not want to contest their father's will, which left everything to his second wife, Stacy Sager. However, their word wasn't good enough for Stacy, so she decided to probate Craig's will in solemn form. For Sager's 3 oldest children, that was just adding insult to injury. They say Stacy spent her entire marriage trying to drive a wedge between them and their dad. Then she got him to write them out of his will so she could have everything. Then she had them banned from their dad's charitable foundation. Then she took legal action to make them go before the court and publicly admit, yeah, our dad doesn't want us to have any of his estate. It's absolutely heartbreaking. Fortunately, there is something of a silver lining to this story. Despite all the drama, despite all the pain, despite all the hurt and suffering, Craig Sager's 3 oldest kids still loved him and spoke kindly about him. In a tweet published on January 2nd, 2018, Casey Sager said she and her siblings were not estranged from their dad, that they had simply compartmentalized the problematic relationship with Stacy so they could have a loving relationship with him. In other words, their dad was a flawed human being, but they never gave up on him. Craig Jr. echoed those sentiments in a statement to TMZ the following day. "I love my dad," he said. "I love my family. I am not mad. I am not in a bad place. I am quite fine. He just wants to be able to move on." Craig Sager fought an inspirational battle against leukemia. There's no denying that. But if you want to know how to live life, look to the example set by his kids. They loved their dad and stuck by his side despite the terrible mistakes he made. They are the real heroes.